Hello, my name is Ben, and today we're going to be discussing You Guys Go, I'll Wait Here, otherwise known as Sonnet to Liberty by Oscar Wilde. To begin, let's actually read the poem. Not that I love thy children, whose dull eyes see nothing save their own unlovely woe, whose minds know nothing, nothing care to know, but that the roar of thy democracies, thy reigns of terror, thy great anarchies, mirror my wildest passions like the sea, and give my rage a brother, liberty. For this sake only do thy dissonant cries delight my discreet soul, else might all kings, by bloody knot or treacherous cannonades, rub nations of their rights and violate, and I remain unmoved. And yet, these Christs that die upon the barricades, God knows that I am with them in some things. Based on this sonnet's rhyme scheme, it seems it's a Petrarchan sonnet, starting out with the almost ABBA scheme in the octave, eyes, democracies, anarchies, cries, woe, no, see, liberty. The sestet has a mirrored rhyme scheme, which could possibly reference how the sestet's topic is mainly about the speaker identifying with the people he speaks of, with the CDE portion being about the things that these people are dealing with, and the EDC portion being more about the speaker's relation to the people themselves. To really understand this sonnet, one must understand what was going on when it was written and who exactly wrote it. Wilde should be a somewhat familiar name. He was a playwright, poet, and author. He's best known for his work as it relates to making fun of the upper class. He wrote a lot of political essays earlier on in his career, which is about where he was at when he wrote this. He lives in England at the time, which, much like the rest of Europe, was having very serious poverty problem. This, along with the knowledge that Wilde himself was likely bisexual and thus inherently challenging European norms with his identity, and that he was incarcerated for his relationships with men, makes it obvious that Wilde himself is not one to stay silent about parts of his country that he doesn't agree with, even if he only writes about it. This naturally brings us to what exactly the sonnet is about. As I mentioned earlier, the speaker is identifying with a group that was getting the shorter end of the metaphorical stick. These Christs that die upon the barricades, God knows that I am with them in some things. Wilde himself was born rich, and this coupled with the poverty issue during this time could mean that he was empathizing with and relating to the struggles of impoverished folks in his country. He may have had radical politics, but it was not common for him to participate in a lot of the street activism. He wrote his beliefs often, meaning there was always a certain distance between what he believed and spoke for and himself. This doesn't invalidate his ideas, but it does make the disconnect between him and other activists at the time make a little more sense. The poem personifies liberty, referencing older movements that granted the lower classes freedom. But that the roar of thy democracies, thy reigns of terror, thy great anarchies, these are subsections of liberty, parts of a whole. These things are liberty's things. The personification of liberty is also suggested by the title, where the speaker is intending to write to liberty as though it's an old friend. This personification works to show how Wilde's activism is mostly written, even though he knows and acknowledges the effectiveness of physical activism. He sees those that are out in the streets literally fighting for their freedoms, and the only thing he can feasibly do is write to liberty metaphorically. Simile is used in only one line in this sonnet. Thy reigns of terror, thy great anarchies, mirror my wildest passions like the sea. It serves to draw a connection between the speaker and older revolutionaries. The speaker's passions are wild and aggressive, agreeing that they are much like those that make anarchies and the people during the Reign of Terror. The speaker sees themselves in those movements so clearly, but knows they are not one and the same. The simile serves the meaning of the poem by making it clear that the speaker is a fighter and does identify with this group, much like how an ocean is wild and, is passionate. I touched on the structure of the poem earlier, but wasn't too specific. The main structural devices used in the sonnet are caesura and more obviously enjambment. Caesura is used in a bit in the octave, I give my rage a brother, liberty, and in some in the sestet, and I remain unmoved, and yet. This makes the sonnet feel like a call for help, which is what it partially is, a call to free the impoverished and grant them the liberty they desire. The enjambment in the sonnet present everywhere, but we can take delight in my discreet soul, else might all kings by bloody knot or treacherous cannonades rob nations of their rights and violate, and so on and so forth. It makes the whole call for help aspect of the sonnet clearer. It reads almost like a letter were it not for the rhyme scheme. The structural aspects of the sonnet, the caesura, and the enjambment uphold the feeling of writing to someone and calling for something, which is what Wilde is trying to do. In short, Wilde was kind of wimpy. He could have gone out there at least once or twice instead of being lame and publishing his little essays about his opinions. Of course, the poem in of itself is supposed to be talking about how he differs from those activists and how he sees himself in the physical activists, even though he himself is not actually there. Which does, unfortunately, make him a wimp. But yeah, thank you for listening. Here are our citations. And I actually promise that I do like Oscar Wilde. I know he did a lot. I just think it's funny to call him a wimp.